welcome back to my YouTube channel. In the video today, I'm going to be making over this rather fabulous cabinet. First things first, I want to introduce you to Winnie the Whippet. This is the new addition to the household. Some of you might know, if you follow me on social media, that we lost our lovely tat a few weeks ago. We've still got Bella, the crazy rescue, and yeah, she was a bit lonely on her own. So here's Winnie. I'm sure you'll see more of her. She's so cute. She's already nicked some paintbrushes and she's just run off with them. So I'm going to let her get on with that and we'll get on with painting. So onto the piece itself. This is quite a nice cabinet. It's got a pretty decent shape. It's got a glazed section to the top, a cupboard area here, and then 3 drawers lower down. One of those drawers has got felt lining, green felt lining, which would be for cutlery. So I am going to say that this would have been in a dining room, probably for, you know, crockery and cutlery and things like that. That's not really something people look for these days, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see that on the market an awful lot. So I'm going to style this as a drinks cabinet or a cocktail cabinet, because I think that'd be a little bit more desirable in today's market. And in terms of paint finish, I'm going to keep this super simple. I just think the cabinet's really beautiful. The handles are lovely. The glazed area is nice. I don't want to go over the top with any kind of decoupage or transfer. Just for this particular piece, I don't feel like it's right. But what I am going to do is mix a custom colour. Now, Dixie Belle have lots and lots of beautiful shades already to play with, but I just like mucking about mixing colours. I always have done. So if you are new to it, I highly recommend you get a little sketch pad like this. This is a watercolour pad, and the pages are nice and thick, which means they don't curl up when you put paint on them. And I just use this for just mucking around with like colour palettes, mixing colours, and that kind of thing, really. Because I kind of mix everything by eye. I don't really do sort of accurate measurements as such. I kind of just muck around with colours as I think, you know, what looks right. So this particular shade is actually a mix of 2 colours. It's Cobalt Blue and it's Tree Frog Green. Both of those are very vibrant shades, and if you are mixing colours, I would highly recommend that you do use a shade of paint that is quite vibrant, like your Tree Frog Greens, your Cobalt Blues, and then you could mix it with something else. Because what happens is, if you get 2 colours that are already quite muted, you will always get a more muted, muddier tone. That's fine if you wanted a muted tone, but I want a kind of richness and depth to this colour. So if you do mix vibrant shades, you will usually get a vibrant but deep colour. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So I could give you lots and lots of examples, but for an example, Hampton Olive is a more muted tone. Even if I added a yellow into that, it would probably still be muted and slightly muddy because it already has like a muddy tone. Whereas because Cobalt Blue and Tree Frog Green are both really punchy shades, when you mix them together you get that vibrant depth of pigment and you don't get like a muddier kind of version of the blue. I hope that makes sense. So that's what I'm going to do. This is got a slightly different mix ratio. This is slightly more green, this is slightly more blue. I'm going to play around a little bit more, but this is the kind of colour scheme that I'm going for. And first of all, before we do any of that malarkey, putting colour on, we've got to prep the cabinet. So to start with, I'm going to take the handles off. These are the handles and you'll see why they're so special. They're really pretty. So I'm going to put those to one side and I'll be putting those back on at the end, and then I'm going to give it a good clean, as always, using Dixie Belle's White Lightning cleaner. And there was some kind of residue on this, it was a little bit sticky, so gave it a really good rub down, rinsed it with clean warm water, and then gave it a scuff sand. The varnish was kind of compromised in areas, so that was sanded smooth, and then I also taped off the hinges as well, just because out of experience sometimes removing doors can be a little bit of a pain. because you can never get them to go back on in the same way. They sometimes don't sit square. So for this particular piece, I'm just going to use a bit of masking tape and tape off the hinges. That way I'm not going to get paint all on them. They're going to stay nice and neat, but it means I don't have to remove the doors. Also, I'm going to tape off that beautiful glass so I don't get any paint splodges on that. Again, I hate masking tape. I really do hate masking tape. It annoys me. It's fiddly. It takes a long time to get the line straight and everything like that, but it is worth it, especially if you've got a bit of glass to protect. So the first thing I'm going to do is prime this. You might think that I'm not putting anything on because you can't really see the product that I'm applying, and that's because it's a clear primer. The reason I'm using clear is because I want to distress this a little bit. So the clear primer is going to allow me to see the wood. When I distress the blue-green, I'm going to be able to see the wood underneath. As I mentioned at the start, I'd already played around with these two colour mixes, so I'm just roughly getting this by eye, but roughly I had about half a tub of cobalt blue, and I'm adding kind of the same amount of tree frog green into the mix, so it's about a 50-50 mix. Like I say, it's not an accurate measurement. I'm just doing it by eye to see if that's the colour that I want. The most similar colour in Dixie Belle's chalk mineral paint range is antebellum blue. So if you wanted a similar colour without having to mix two, you could use antebellum blue. A lot of people ask what's in the mister bottle that I spray on before I start painting, and that's just tap water in a continuous mister bottle. It gives you a nice fine spray of water on the surface of your piece. I also like to spray the brush before I start painting as well, just to make sure that's a little bit damp, and it just helps your paint go on nice and smooth. And also, because Dixie Belle paint is very pigmented, it helps your paint go a little bit further. And the brush that I'm using is one of Dixie Belle's synthetic brushes because I want to go for a nice smooth finish with this one. There's no texture or anything like that I want. And all of the products that I'll be using in this video, as always, will be linked in the description below. They are affiliate links, so if you do purchase from those links, I earn a small commission, but it won't cost you a penny more. Your second coat of paint is where you're really going to see the coverage and the vibrancy of the shade. On screen, this does look very similar to antebellum blue, but in person, it is quite a lot different. It's very vibrant, but deep at the same time, if that makes any sense at all. As I said at the very beginning, I wanted to distress around the edges of this. I just think that warm tone wood is going to contrast really nicely with the teal shade. So I just did that with a little bit of sandpaper and a sanding sponge just to get a nice smooth finish. And then wax is always going to be my favourite way of finishing a project. Dixie Belle's chalk mineral paint is really, really durable. You actually don't need to top coat it if you don't want to. However, it does have a matte chalky finish. So if you wanted something with a little bit of a sheen, or if you did want to add any extra protection, then you can add a top coat if you wanted to. So I'm using wax because it's my favourite way to finish a project. And I'm just doing clear wax and I'm putting it on with a sponge. I prefer using a sponge, especially if I've got a flat kind of plain surface like this over a brush. I just feel like a sponge gives you a much thinner, more even application, and you don't get any patchiness this way. That's just my personal preference, and I just like to work it into the paint and swirl motions and kind of run my sponge over it, let it dry for a little while, and then come back in with the rag. So this is the most important bit of applying wax, is removing the excess. Otherwise it's just going to stay sticky and tacky. You're not going to be able to buff it to a sheen, and it's just going to take forever to dry. So go back in with a lint-free rag and make sure you buff your wax out. Then if you want to add coats after that for extra durability, or if you think it might be patchy, you can always add subsequent coats after that. I did add a little bit of gold gilding wax to the hardware and the handles just to brighten them slightly, but they were in excellent condition, so I didn't really need to do a lot to them before I added them back on. And here is the finished project. As always, thank you for tuning in and watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe to my channel, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.